the previous videos, we have covered the complex engineering problems. There are 7 complex engineering problems. In order to have the complex engineering problems, you will require WP1 plus at least 2 of the others WPs. How do we know that when we should have the complex engineering problem? We will look at the graduate attributes. When the term complex engineering problems appear, that means we will have to have the complex engineering problems for the course attending to the relevant graduate attributes. There is one more item here, which is the engineering activities. Specifically, we are talking about complex engineering activities. The relevant attributes you can refer to the IEA document as outlined here. The complex engineering activities will be the unique characteristics for the engineering program, which are producing engineer graduates. The relevant statements are given here. Now, how do we know that when we should have the complex engineering activities? Again, this has to go back to the graduate attributes. Under the communication part, you will see the term complex engineering activities, which means that whichever COs attending to the PO that is addressing the communications as the graduate attribute, there should be complex engineering activities. This complex engineering activities is not just any activities. The activities needs to be engineering related, and it is not just any engineering activity. It should have adequate level of complexity. That's why it is termed as complex engineering activities. Now let us look at the attributes as well as the definitions of the complex engineering activities. Based on the definition here, it should have some or all of the following characteristics. What does it mean by some? Having one out of these 5 does not constitute a complex engineering activities. Some means bare minimum 2. You may also push it to the extreme, where one activities will have all the characteristics here. You may also choose to have at least 2 of them. It cannot be none of them, and it cannot be only one. Having this clear, then let us look into the attributes. Now the requirement here is slightly different from the complex engineering problem. The complex engineering problem make compulsory of WP1 plus at least 2 of the others. But the complex engineering activities does not make compulsory of any of those EA. As long as there are combinations of more than one, that should be considered as complex engineering activities. EA1 is about the range of resources. Looking at the statement here, the relevant activities shall involve the use of diverse resources, including the people, data and information, natural, financial and physical resources, and appropriate technologies, including the analytical and/or design software. Now the main emphasis here it will be the resources, and these resources should be diversified. Again, you can use this as the template. the requirements are diverse. That means by definitions of diverse, 2 is not diverse enough. I would say it is at least 3. It depends on your interpretations. Some may say 2 is diverse enough, but to be safe and conservative, we will require at least 3 here. That means it involves diverse resources during the course of participating the engineering activities. We have people, we have data and informations, we have natural, we have financial and physical resources. Theoretically, you can classify all these 3 together, which make it natural, financial and physical resources. At least this is what the statement implies here. And then appropriate technologies and software. If you wish, you can break down this furthermore, having one for the technology, having another one for the software. You may also choose to break down this to be more. One item for natural resources, one for financial resources, and another one for physical resources. It goes back to how do you interpret the statement. Now, if you look at the term and or, that means when you talk about the technology, it may include analytical and or design software. So, to be more specific, these technologies are more related to the software. Now it will be up to your interpretations whether this is inclusive of the testing equipments. If you want to play safe, you can limit everything towards the software. But because of the term here including, anything not specified here, as long as it can be classified under the technology, I feel it is reasonable to consider. That's why when come to this item here, we can consider those with technologies or software. Because you need it to be diversified, you will require at least 3 out of this. Let's say now you involve manpower, you involve resources such as natural resources, and you involve technology. And then you have 3 items at least here. It is good enough to establish EA1, which is range of resources. This leads to another question. Can we make it only 1 item? Let's say now we are talking about people as the main resources involved, but you have peoples from different natures and expertise, and you have 3 groups of people. Or probably you involve natural resources, at the same time financial resources, and also physical resources. Will it constitute to EA1? This will have to go back to how do you interpret the statements here. Or let's say now you have an activities involving the test equipment and software, and when you sum up all these technological items, it is already more than 3. Can this be considered as the EA1? Like I said, it depends on how do you interpret this. You should provide relevant justifications. As for me, to be safe, the spreadsheet here sets the conditions of different nature. You need to have the resources of different nature in order to be considered a good range of resources. I feel this is safer, and there will be less argument when it comes to the interpretations by the accreditations body later. Now you have to provide relevant justifications. You have the people, you have the financial and physical resources. You also involve some technology and software. This makes you a good range of resources. You can have all of these items. This makes the engineering activities more interesting but more complex. Next is about EA2, which is the level of interaction. It requires optimal resolutions of interactions between wide-ranging and or conflicting technical, non-technical, and engineering issues. The relevant activities can be technical or non-technical and also can be related to the engineering. There will be interactions between a wide-ranging or conflicting issues. That means there are definitely going to be more than one issues in order to have the interactions. Now it is not only about the interaction. They are seeking for optimal resolutions of those interactions. You need to prove two things here. First thing is you will have sufficient issues in order to trigger the interactions between the issue. The second thing that you need to prove is that the relevant engineering activity is demanding for an optimal resolutions of those interactions. Since this is engineering activities, which is closely related to the communications as the graduate attribute, the emphasis here is not the number of issues. As long as you prove there are sufficient number of issues, that is the basic requirement. Having the ability to communicate well is that there should be optimal resolutions of those interactions. You can set those conditions in the EA2 here, as what you have seen here, and based on the interpretation just now. There is still slight limitations of this form. The form pay more emphasis in terms of the issues, the numbers of issues. When the number of issues is sufficient, there will be interactions. Just that if you want to have additional requirement in terms of the optimal resolution, this will be more appropriately representing EA2. Again, coming back to our first principle, as a start, trying to create the awareness and the culture of developing complex engineering activities, we go for a simpler interpretations of the EA2. It will be once the lecturers gain sufficient experience, understand how it works, then we go for a more conservative interpretation. The numbers here, it will be very much dependent on the terminology. To have issues to be conflicting, you need at least 2. To have the issue to be considered as wide-ranging, I would say it would be at least 3, depending on your interpretation. The bottom line here is you should have good justifications in terms of the EA2. Let's say now involve 2 issues here. There are issues of conflicting. This will constitute EA2. Next, EA3 is about innovation. It involves creative use of engineering principles, innovative solutions for a consensus purpose, and research-based knowledge. The emphasis, it will be the innovation. That means it is related to creativity and innovation. you will need to demonstrate the creativity and innovations in terms of the applications of the engineering principle and also the solutions for the engineering problem, and it should meet the purpose. Based on the term "and" here, that means it will require research-based knowledge as well. So let us break down the content of this statement. There will be creative use of engineering principle, innovative solutions for a consensus purpose, and research-based knowledge. Theoretically, based on this statement here, all three here should exist concurrently. But I perceive this will be quite stringent, and my emphasis are put more towards the creativity and innovations, since the attribute is related to innovation. So in this case, instead of you have to have all three items here, I set the requirements to be one at least of these three. You can have any one of them. You can have any two of them. You can also have all of them. As long as any one of them involved, I would say it is EC3. But you have to be careful on this research-based knowledge. If when you deal with research-based knowledge, there is no components of creativity and innovation, this shouldn't be considered. You will have to go back to the original meaning of this EA3. It is all about the innovation. With that, if you are not sure you have this with the innovation part, probably you just declare the one that you are comfortably meeting, such as creativity use of engineering principle and innovative solutions. Or you can even have only one of them. As a start, building up the culture among the lecturer to incorporate this, I will go for a more simpler definition. As long as any one of those fulfill, that should be acceptable. And then remember, you can do CQI along the way. Once the lecturer has gained experience, they know how to do it, they have the ability to incorporate necessary things in the engineering activities. By then, you could go for a more conservative definition. The bottom line here is not for you to alter the meaning of those statements. It will be just a matter of interpretation. I believe the accreditations body will not be that strict. Really dig into it and see if there is any wrong interpretations of those statements. As long as you demonstrate you are trying to adopt the relevant components, that should be sufficient. And normally accreditations visit will be conducted in a few days. There are so many critical items to be checked. Checking to this detailed extent, it will be too much and too difficult to handle. And then the CQI have to come within the institution. If you feel you can do it better, you can always call for improvement at the voluntary basis. Next, it will be EA4. It is about the consequences to the society and the environment. The statement have significant consequences in a range of contexts characterized by difficulty of predicting and mitigation. Now the emphasis here, it will be the consequences, where the consequences is too significant. That does not allow for any errors or mistakes. It is not only having significant consequences, there will also be difficulty in terms of the predictions and mitigation. So if you are talking about this, you will need to have both to be considered having EA4. The last attribute of complex engineering activity, it will be EA5, which is familiarity. The relevant activity can extend beyond previous experiences by applying principle-based approaches. What does it mean? It means that the previous experience is insufficient to cover those activities. It is basically beyond the previous experience. This is about the familiarity. So we have only one criteria here. As long as it extends beyond the previous experience, we will consider existence of EA5. Remember to have proper justifications and descriptions to prove the existence of those EA. The requirement now, it will be you need at least 2 EA available to be considered as complex engineering activities. Now coming back to the question, when do you need to incorporate complex engineering activity? You will need to look at the course outcome of a particular course. If there is any course outcome attending to the graduate attribute related to the communication, that means you will have to provide complex engineering activities under that particular CO. This complex engineering activity will have to be a part of the teaching and learning activities. Personally, I feel that the complex engineering activity is not suitable under the assessment. What kind of assessment that we can do on the complex engineering activities? Since we are doing the activities only, the assessment shall focus on the course outcome. Just that when the relevant course outcome is met to the graduate attribute or the PO addressing the communications, then you make sure there should be complex engineering activities incorporated within your teaching and learning activities. Now let us talk about another question. Can complex engineering activities be standalone without the elements of complex engineering problem? My answer is yes and no. Normally when we talk about complex engineering activities, we are talking about the activity itself having the relevant levels of complexity. The focus is the components of the activities. But when we talk about complex engineering problems, the focus is identifying the problem and solving the problem. So it is possible for you to design engineering activities which is complex enough without incorporating the complex engineering problem. In this case, your emphasis is not the ability of the students to solve the complex problem. Your emphasis now is for the students to participate in the complex engineering activities, gain experience, and build up the relevant skills through those activities. It is also possible for you to design complex engineering activity, which at the same time you are also looking at their ability to identify and to solve the engineering problem. In this case, you will have both complex engineering problem and complex engineering activities together. Make sure you fulfill the relevant criteria, both for complex engineering activities and the complex engineering problem. Next, it is also possible of you only focusing on complex engineering problem without having the complex engineering activities. Now your main emphasis it will be the ability of the students to solve the complex problem. This makes the answer to be yes and no. Yes means you can have both complex engineering problem and complex engineering activities at the same time. No means the complex engineering problem and complex engineering activities can be stand alone. They don't have to always come together.